So imagine an entire global government aiming to be literally 100% AI native in just a few short years.
Right.
We're not talking about some rogue innovation lab or, a single experimental department. This is a massive top-to-bottom system overhaul backed by a staggering 13 billion dirham investment.
Which sounds like speculative fiction, but it is actually the current operational reality in Abu Dhabi right now.
Exactly. And welcome to today's deep dive. We are looking at a literal technological earthquake today.
Yeah, and if you are a European business leader or, a CTO evaluating your own enterprise architecture, this is absolutely the market signal you need to be deciphering.
Because it's not just a local IT upgrade.
No, it's the Abu Dhabi Government Digital Strategy 2025-2027. And it is essentially acting as a global stress test for enterprise AI adoption because it's a top-down, fully funded mandate.
Right, so it's forcing the rapid maturation of deployment frameworks and procurement standards.
Exactly. If you plan to expand into that market or even just want to benchmark your roadmap against the fastest adopters on the planet, understanding this ecosystem is just a baseline requirement.
So our mission for this deep dive is to extract the actionable mechanics from this massive shift. We're working through a really fascinating article from AetherLink.
They're a Dutch AI consulting firm, right?
Yes, and the text details how their specialized strategy products, specifically their ethermind consultancy, are helping enterprises navigate this government-led innovation wave.
Which is crucial when you look at the technical realities of deploying AI in a multicultural, multilingual landscape.
Exactly, and doing it without triggering catastrophic system failures. So let's start with the sheer scale of the ground game here.
Yeah, the numbers are wild. The source outlines over 200 distinct production-level AI solutions already deployed across their public sector.
And they are simultaneously upskilling 95% of their 30,000 government employees.
Right? 95% in AI fundamentals. Plus, they're projecting a 24 billion Durham GDP contribution and 5,000 new AI-specific roles by 2027.
Which represents a structural transformation. I mean, we aren't just moving PDF forms to web portals here.
No, it's integrating predictive analytics to anticipate citizen needs, or using autonomous agents for really high-complexity service delivery.
It actually reminds me of when the first truly intuitive smartphones hit the market. Once you experience that frictionless interface, the old clunky operating systems felt instantly obsolete.
Yeah, you just couldn't go back.
Right. So if a government citizen service chatbot can seamlessly process, say, a multi-layered query about municipal taxes and vehicle registration in real time, the baseline completely resets.
Oh, absolutely. A
Yeah.
retail bank or a logistics provider operating in that same region simply cannot get away with a rigid, rules-based chatbot anymore.
Consumers just won't accept it.
Right. And in economics, we call that a demonstration effect. We are watching it cascade across the private sector in real time.
Because private enterprises are seeing state-run healthcare use AI diagnostics or government finance using real-time fraud detection, and they feel the pressure immediately.
Which explains the data showing a 35 to 40% year-over-year growth in private sector AI investments there. European tech firms and local enterprises are scrambling to move from small pilot projects to massive production deployments.
Because delaying means bleeding market share.
And disqualification from lucrative vendor contracts. Government suppliers now expect AI-native interoperability as a standard feature.
Okay, but let me push back on the complexity of that transition for foreign enterprises. Because if I'm a European CTO tuning into this, I've probably already burned millions building and fine-tuning an English language LLM on my enterprise data.
Right, it's a massive sunk cost.
Exactly. So telling my board we have to rebuild from scratch for a regional market is a tremendously tough sell. From an engineering perspective, why can't I just use a high-end translation API wrapper?
I mean, it sounds logical enough.
Right. I route the Arabic user input through a low-latency translation API, process the logic in my English core model, and translate the output back. It's fast and it's cost-effective.
It is an incredibly common approach, and it is the exact assumption that leads to spectacular, expensive failures in this specific market.
Wait, really? Just because of translation errors?
It's deeper than that. A translation API simply maps tokens. It does not capture semantic weight or cultural behavioral norms.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, Arabic is a morphologically rich, highly agglutinative language. A single word in Arabic can often represent an entire sentence in English.
So when you pass that through a translation wrapper into a Western-trained LLM,
The attention mechanism phase of the model misallocates the semantic weight completely. The underlying math is deeply biased toward English syntax and Western reasoning.
So the fundamental math just breaks down, leading to hallucinations or completely disjointed logic.
Exactly. And the failure extends beyond syntax into data provenance. Western models are trained mostly on North American and European data sets, Reddit, Wikipedia, Western media.
Which doesn't map to local preferences at all.
Right. If your enterprise deploys an autonomous agent, it's going to push communication styles that deeply misalign with local cultural norms.
Like a response the English model categorizes as assertive might translate as aggressive in Arabic.
Aggressive and totally culturally tone-deaf, which really highlights why the ethermind strategy mentioned in the text is so critical. It's not just about writing clean Python code.
Right. The mandate is to engineer cultural literacy into the foundational architecture itself.
Exactly. Leading consultancies are ditching translation wrappers entirely. They ensure models are fine-tuned or built from the ground up on high-quality Arabic datasets.
Covering both modern standard Arabic and specific local Emirati dialects, I assume.
Yes, and calibrating the model's reward functions. So the training data actually respects local cultural boundaries in customer-facing applications.
Because if you fail to localize at that base layer, you guarantee user friction. Your whole investment evaporates because the end user feels completely alienated.
Exactly. Context and cultural literacy govern the algorithm in this market.
But okay, if localizing requires millions in engineering hours and specialized fine-tuning, a CTO is immediately going to look at the regulatory risk.
Naturally.
What happens if a company invests massive capital into this localized architecture, and then Abu Dhabi passes sweeping, restrictive AI legislation next year?
That is the governance gap.
Right, because the source text mentions the Emirate doesn't have a formalized unified AI Act on the books yet, not like the EU just deployed.
They don't.
So given that legal vacuum, wouldn't a rational business leader just delay major deployment until there's a strict law on the books? Isn't spending on compliance right now just slowing down innovation?
It seems like it, but waiting for a formalized act is a dangerous miscalculation of how tech hubs function. The key operational concept here is de facto compliance.
Okay, walk us through that. How does a market enforce rules that don't technically exist in legislation yet?
Well, the Emirates procurement standards are aggressively aligned with the broader UAE AI Strategy 2031 and global governance frameworks.
So the stakeholders demand it anyway.
Exactly. The government entities issuing these massive vendor contracts enforce regulation through procurement prerequisites.
Got it. So if you're bidding for a state contract, they demand algorithmic explainability.
Yes, and documented bias auditing mechanisms, localized data sovereignty protocols, and guaranteed human-in-the-loop oversight.
So the market just regulates itself at the point of sale. You either meet the standard or you simply don't get the contract.
Technically, it means you absolutely cannot bring a black box model to the table. Consultancies like AetherLink emphasize integrating explainability algorithms like SAP or Lime directly into your pipeline.
You have to prove mathematically how the model made a specific decision.
Right. Designing that level of governance into the AI system from day one transforms compliance from a bottleneck into a hard competitive advantage.
Because if you put yourself in the shoes of an Abu Dhabi government agency awarding a critical infrastructure contract,
yeah, they're evaluating a tech giant with a blazing fast black box model versus a vendor with a slightly more resource-intensive model that features proactive ethical frameworks and clear audit trails.
they're going to pick the vendor with embedded governance every single time.
Every time. It mitigates institutional risk. They know they won't have to rip the whole system out in 3 years when formal legislation inevitably passes.
So building sustainable AI there means treating compliance as foundational engineering, not some post-production legal review.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've established the technical hurdles of localization and the need for de facto compliance. The next logical hurdle is deployment.
The operational side, yeah.
How does a legacy enterprise actually integrate this highly localized, compliant AI without totally disrupting their existing daily operations?
Well, you definitely cannot halt a hospital's triage system or a bank's fraud department for 6 months to install a new cognitive core.
A hard cutover would be a disaster. Which brings us to a really instructive case study from the source material about a mid-sized enterprise in Abu Dhabi.
Right. They were implementing customer service automation.
And instead of just firing their staff and flipping a switch, they used a phased shadow mode rollout based on the government's own deployment templates.
Which is brilliant.
It actually reminds me of onboarding a brilliant but totally inexperienced junior colleague.
That's a great analogy.
You wouldn't hand a new hire the keys to your most sensitive client accounts on day one. You have them work alongside seasoned veterans.
Right. They draft the communications, but a senior partner reviews every single word before it goes out.
Exactly. And over time, as they prove their reliability and absorb the nuance of the company's voice, you steadily increase their autonomy.
That maps perfectly to the technical execution of reinforcement learning from human feedback, or RLHF.
So the enterprise integrated their chatbots gradually.
Yes, in the initial phase, the AI operated in shadow mode. It generated responses to incoming citizen inquiries, but it lacked the permissions to actually execute the final action.
So human agents were reviewing the output, correcting inaccuracies, and handling escalations.
Exactly, and every single human correction was fed back into the model, which continuously fine-tuned its performance on live, localized data.
Treating the AI like a junior colleague under supervision totally changes the risk profile. So what were the tangible business outcomes for this company?
By enforcing this human-in-the-loop shadow mode, they achieved a 60% automation rate for routine inquiries.
Wow, 60%. That's massive operational cost savings.
While simultaneously maintaining really high customer satisfaction metrics. Plus, they brought their existing workforce along for the transition.
Right, upskilling their human agents into AI supervisors instead of just triggering organizational panic.
Which points directly to the value of the embedded consultancy model that ethermind employs.
Because traditional consulting is often just a team flying in, dropping off a dense strategic PDF, and sending an invoice.
And a dusty PDF does not help a CTO when the newly deployed model starts drifting or hallucinating 3 months post-launch.
Right, so embedded consultancy means the consultants integrate deeply into the client organization.
They engineer the initial pipeline, sure, but their primary directive is to build internal capabilities. They train the client's internal engineering and ops teams.
And the article mentions they partner with local institutions, like the Mohammed bin Zayed University of AI.
Yes, to establish direct pipelines for localized talent upskilling. So when the external consultants eventually step back, the enterprise has the internal resilience to maintain and evolve the AI architecture autonomously.
Okay, we've covered immense ground today. The scale of the 13 billion Durham mandate, the pitfalls of translation APIs, de facto compliance, and shadow mode deployments.
It's a lot to process.
So synthesizing all of this, what is your #1 takeaway that European leaders need to extract from this deep dive?
For me, the foundational takeaway is that deep localization is simply non-negotiable. It is the absolute bedrock of system survival in this region.
You have to do the hard engineering work.
Right. If you fail to account for the morphological complexity of Arabic or the specific cultural dynamics, your deployment will fail. The sunk cost of your Western technology doesn't matter if the semantic weight of the output alienates the end user.
That's a really powerful point. My major takeaway actually revolves around the long-term implications of the government's human capital strategy.
The workforce upskilling.
Yeah. Training 95% of a 30,000-person public sector staff in AI fundamentals creates this incredible market spillover effect.
Oh, totally. It alters the baseline talent pool of the entire region.
Exactly. Because as these highly AI-literate government workers transition to the private sector or even just act as consumers, their expectations are permanently elevated.
Which forces the private sector to elevate its own operational standards just to remain competitive as an employer and a service provider.
Right. And that leaves us with a really fascinating, somewhat provocative thought for you to mull over.
I love these. Let's hear it.
If 30,000 government workers are suddenly operating as AI native, we might be rapidly moving toward a reality where a citizen's baseline expectation is that their municipal government is actually more technologically advanced than the private companies they buy from.
That completely flips the traditional dynamic on its head.
It really does. The source notes the initiative allows for real-time, data-driven policy adjustments.
Which is huge.
Right. So what happens to enterprise business strategy when an AI-native government can change regulations, optimize supply chains, or adjust economic policies in real time based on live citizen data?
Your rigid, traditional 5-year enterprise strategy becomes entirely obsolete.
Exactly. How agile will your company's AI need to be just to keep up with the velocity of the regulatory body governing it?
Operating in an environment where state-level macro policy is as fluid as a machine learning model requires an entirely new framework for enterprise agility.
It is an incredible engineering and leadership challenge.
Truly.
For more AI insights, visit etherlink.ai.